This one's going to be a bit of a different one, but I've always wanted to tell this story. Welcome to the 8th of May, 1999. We're at Brunton Park in Carlisle, England, and things are dire for the home team. As it stands, 1-1 in the 94th minute, they will be relegated from England's top 4 leagues for the first time. What happens next defies logic, belief, and the very rules of football. But first, some background. Carlisle United had just finished celebrating their 100th anniversary, although they'd spent their first years as Shaddengates. Glad they changed that. They've had a rich, although hardly successful history, but the real interesting stuff starts in 1997. They outright dominated in the 96-97 season, earning promotion and winning the Football League Cup while only conceding a single goal. Then they only managed 4 points in the opening 6 matches for 97 and 98. Not great, but not awful, especially as all 4 sides they lost to would compete for promotion. Unfortunately for manager Mervyn Day, one man didn't see it that way. Michael Knighton was a pillar of success. Of course he wasn't, he started at Everton. He became rich as a a property magnate, and he was looking to sink his newfound moolah into his beloved football. After a failed attempt to buy Manchester United at the comparative bargain price of £20 million, he bought Carlisle in 1992. They were struggling. Only 17 years after featuring in the top flight, they were facing relegation from the Football League. He sunk his money into the club, earning multiple promotions, and by 1997, Carlisle were flying higher than the UFOs he allegedly saw that one time. But he wanted more. He wanted power. He saw a flimsy excuse to bin the man in charge and take responsibility for what he thought would be an easy re-promotion. They got 7 points from the next 3, although it is claimed that Dave Wilkes was caretaker manager during this time. Then they fell off a cliff. They tried to salvage their season but lost 9 of their last 10 to get relegated to the 3rd division. They were joined by Southend, Brentford, yes, that Brentford, and a team you're going to get familiar with later. The club entered the 98-99 season teetering on the precipice, with Knighton basically having run out of empty land to flog at overinflated prices and therefore money to pump into the team he'd now ruined. And things got worse once the season got underway. They lost future Premier League footballers Rory Delap and Matt Jansen and star player Lee Peacock. Carlisle lost 5 of the opening 7, then bounced back to go the next 7 unbeaten. 19 points over the first 14 games wasn't ideal, especially since fellow relegated club Brentford had 27. But then it got worse. 12 points over the next 14 games. Knighton then finally decided to step down from managing, appointing the recently retired player Nigel Pearson. Yeah, that Nigel Pearson. He got 12 points over the next 14 games. Knighton, desperate for cash to keep the club afloat, sold Carlisle's main keeper Tony Cagg for £40,000 in late March, right before the lower league's transfer deadline, and brought in Richard Knight on loan to replace him. He does not well. They sit last, in a league with 1 relegation spot. They look set to join the exclusive double relegation club. Then we get to match day 43, a loss to Rotherham United, and an injury to Knight, the only remaining fit keeper on Carlisle's playing list. The sale of Tony Cagg was necessary as Knighton had done the old Pompey 2-step, trying to buy his team success, failing and ending up with a wallet as empty as mine. But it meant that any injury to Knight left their goal quite literally empty. So, at the 11th hour, Carlisle gets special dispensation to sign an emergency keeper on loan. They shop around and opt for Swindon glove man James Jimmy Glass. He'd shown promise at Bournemouth but had fallen out with the Swindon manager Jimmy Quinn. United conceded 4 over the next 2 games with Glass in goal, but importantly scored 4 to salvage 2 points. They lie only 1 point beneath 23rd place Scarborough. They entered the final game of the season with a simple equation in front of them. If they won, and Scarborough didn't, they were safe.
Ad time?
Carlisle had a barnstorming start, generating more chances but just directing them wide, including an early crossbar hit from deadline day signing Richard Tracy. Glass was forced to make a save up the other end soon after off 250-game veteran Martin Barlow. Scott Dobie drew first blood for Carlisle, but his headed goal was struck off and called back for a foul. At half-time it was 0-0, while Scarborough had pegged the score back to 1-1 after an early Peterborough opener. However, against a run of play, it was Plymouth's Lee Phillips who went on a mazy run and opened the scoring from long range. It looked like Carlisle were going to get football managered and relegated. Then things got kind of weird, with Cardiff veteran Damon Searle and homegrown talent Richard Prokas getting involved in some WWE crap with the 16-year-old John Ashton, who was actually bigger than both of them. Graham Anthony, a former Plymouth man himself, really stapled his colours to the mast with his reaction. He'd get some revenge though, lofting a ball to David Brightwell, who, well, even if he wasn't a defender, he had no right to Steven Gerrard this into the net, but he'd drawn his side level with half an hour to play. Carlisle attacked with renewed vigour as Scott Dobie missed a couple of chances. But as the whistle sounded at McCain Stadium, it looked like it wasn't going to be enough. Scarborough had held on to their 1-1 result and fans ran onto their home ground, celebrating their survival as Carlisle went on one last attack, miles and miles and miles away. The 4 minutes of stoppage time had all but elapsed. Anthony wins a corner. 9 Carlisle players are in the box. The 10th takes the corner. The other one is here. Yep, no goalie. Jimmy Glass got the wave down from Nigel Pearson and took his place in the melee of players mere feet from Plymouth's goal, each hoping that they could steer their respective club to survival. All that was left to do was let history play out. If it weren't so triumphant, it would be comical. Dobie with another missed chance, then James Dungey doing perhaps the least useful thing a keeper could do in that situation, palming it to the feet of his opposite number, who breaks free of his marker to poke it in, accidentally belting a teenager who belted 2 of his teammates, before getting buried under half the population of a town he would only play in for 3 weeks, but be immortalised at forever. The main protagonists of this game would rarely see better times than this. David Brightwell, who scored that wonder strike, didn't score again for Carlisle, retiring 3 years later. Searle, who got his arse beat by a kid, was loaned away the next season and was gone by 2001, but was still playing at Barry Town at the age of 47, where he now coaches. Graham Anthony, who started the final play, never played another league game. He got shipped off to Barrow immediately after the season finished and only played 4 cup games. Scott Dobie, who had so many chances to be the hero himself, played well for Carlisle before earning a £150,000 move to West Brom, playing 2 seasons in the Premier League, scoring on his Scottish national team debut, before eventually returning to Carlisle. Nigel Pearson, who in a sense masterminded all this, left immediately after. His managerial career was steeped in mediocrity, aside from building the Premier League winning Leicester squad, but failing to manage it after he was sacked because his son released a sex tape. Yeah, weird. And Tony Cake, the man who was sold, allowing all this nonsense to happen, came back to Carlisle over a decade later to win them the Football League trophy, and later managed them for a bit. I'm assuming he didn't sell all the goalies while he did so. The club itself still sank. It entered administration, which spelled the end of a decade-long Knighton-led rollercoaster, with 14 managers having revolved through, and the club finally having succumbed to relegation from the Football League. They managed to bounce straight back up though, courtesy of player-manager Paul Simpson. In fact, they really came back. Simpson left the job right here, but in true Carlisle fashion, he came back only recently and managed them now, having only just kept them from being relegated from League 2 again. Scarborough, on the other hand, never recovered from this match. This was their first relegation in the club's 120-year history to that point. They were relegated twice more, entered administration twice, and dissolved in 2008. Thanks in part to Jimmy Glass, the ground that Scarborough FC played in for 110 years, is now a supermarket with a stupid name. And as for Jimmy Glass, well, his story's probably the saddest of all. He got no secondary glories. Carlisle were unable to sign him on a permanent basis, likely due to their interesting financial situation. He played only 43 more senior matches over the next 5 years, spanning 8 clubs before retiring at the age of 27. He became an IT consultant and later a taxi driver before joining Bournemouth's player staff. He bemoaned the fleeting nature of his fame and the mundanity of his anonymity, but he appreciated the goal for what it was, an elite